Our next speaker has a unique perspective as a member of Congress who is also a former service member. He spent 24 years in the National Guard, eventually reaching the rank of Command Sergeant Major. Upon his election to Congress in 2007, he became the highest-ranking enlisted soldier ever to serve in Congress. He serves on the House Veterans Affairs Committee and has devoted himself to the welfare of this country's service members. He is especially concerned about how our government will treat military personnel once they leave the military. Last fall, he made a trip to visit our service members overseas. During that visit, he was taken aback by the thrust of his discussions with many of the troops. The troops weren't focused on IEDs, snipers, the weapons aimed at them. They were more concerned with the budget discussions that mentioned increases in the cost of TRICARE for them and their families, a civilian-type 401k retirement program, and reduction in troop levels. Instead of paying attention to those who would do them harm, they were focused on their supposed friends here in Washington. I'm sure you'll all agree with me that this should never happen to the men and women who wear our uniform. So please join me in welcoming from the 1st District of Minnesota, United States Representative Tim Walz.
Madam President, good to see you. You're missing the snow. Good to see you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Glad you're here. Well, thank you. Good to see you. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you. To Commander Wong, thank you. His recent tour of Minnesota was a rousing success, and I just don't want him to get complacent and think this is a typical winter. It is not. And so our president, who we are so proud of, will tell you that we're going to get our first significant snowfall of the year, probably starting today, so you're in the right place. So to Chuck Kruger, our president in Minnesota, my president as a fellow Legionnaire, and my constituent in Byron, thank you to you and the whole delegation for being here. A special thank you to each of you. There are many places you could be. There are places you could take your talent, you could take your resources, the time that you're spending here, and there's one very, very simple reason, as I always say, why you do that. You love this country with all your heart, and you recognize that if you're not here doing it, no one else will. So for that, I'm humbled to be with you. I'm always incredibly proud of what this organization does, and I think it's important for us to remember, especially in this town, there's lots of people with their opinions. There's lots of people with their voices putting in on things. We have a sacred responsibility to the warriors who have defended this country in past, present, and future to get it right. And I can tell you, I, for one, every time the American Legion's in town or every time your folks are on the Hill, I rest a little easier because I know they're getting it right for all the right reasons. So. It's always great to follow my friend. My district borders Iowa across the whole northern tier to have Secretary Vilsack here. I was going to tell him I, for one, with a clean conscience, can say I've never told a joke about Iowa. I've listened to some, but I've never told them. But I've got a lot of folks in my district that end up at the Spirit Lake, Iowa Seabach, and we change back and forth across that border. He's a good man committed to our rural values and making sure that we get our veterans hired, not only because it's morally the right thing to do. My goodness, these are the best and brightest America has to offer. Why would we not want them teaching our children, protecting our streets, running our companies? We need to do everything possible to make that happen. I also come to you after a long career. You heard that, and I'm very grateful for the kind remarks that were made. And I do have the distinction of being the highest-ranking enlisted soldier to serve in Congress. But I see that far less as an honor and far more as a mission and a calling. That my responsibility is to get it right every day when I wake up. My number one concern needs to be how do we make sure that we defend this nation, and how do we make sure that we keep those promises that we made to those who sacrificed so much. And we certainly couldn't do it alone. It's with organizations like the American Legion that we're making progress. So I have to tell you, I come here now and I look out across you. I also taught school for 20 years. I know you've been setting for a long time, so I thank Tim and the folks here for putting me on last right before the lunch hour. But I also know that our commitment of doing that, someone said, how do you keep your optimism in Washington? I said, oh, for goodness sakes, I supervised the lunchroom for 20 years. You got to stay optimistic. I took a football team. I coached a football team when I moved to my school, and they told me, well, we've been struggling a little bit. Now, you have to remember, I grew up in a small town of 25 people in my high school class. 12 were my cousins, but we were in Nebraska. Somebody always asked me, they said, how'd that prom dating go? And I said, interesting to say the least. But I grew up in that small town in Nebraska where football was king, farms were king, family and country were what it did. It was expected of us. So the day I turned 17, my dad put me in the car and I went and signed up for the National Guard. That's the way you did it. That's what was expected of you, that all of the privileges that we had in this country and all of the things that we were able to do, it was explained to us at a very early age, came at a cost and it came at a responsibility of serving. So I feel very blessed to grow up in that small community. But as I said, football was king. I moved to my new school in Minnesota and they said, well, we're struggling a little bit, Coach Walz, with the team. I said, what's struggling mean? They said, well, we haven't won in 4 years. And I said, geez, that's not struggling, that's dead. We got to do better. But 3 years later, we won a state championship, and they won 2 cents. So I said, I think that as you in here, sometimes it feels like we got a bit of an uphill struggle in this town, but I think the moral purpose of what we're doing speaks for itself. The folks that we represent, those Americans, that small percentage of Americans willing to put their life on the line for others to have their beliefs, for others to come to this city and debate our policies, I think we know that the righteousness is on our side. Certainly the importance of getting it right is on our side, and I think every day, I think it's certainly a little bit easier than an 0-36 team because the country's with us. But our responsibility, and I heard from this organization now, we can never rest. We must absolutely get it right. And think of this. I was thinking of this today. You watch what passes for civil debate in this town now, the sniping and how small our politics have become at a time when our challenges and opportunities have grown so big. So we're here sniping and on each other, and I think about this every day that I go to work here. The honor of standing in front of my neighbors and being elected to speak for them in the greatest nation and the strongest democracy the world has ever seen, there's a responsibility on me to conduct myself in a manner reflective of this great nation. Now, what you just heard is absolutely true. We have warriors downrange, and I want to read something to you. I want to read you just 4 names. Major Robert Marshani, Lieutenant Colonel John Loftus, Sergeant Josh Bourne, and Corporal Tim Conrad, Jr., native sons of Maryland, Kentucky, Florida, and Virginia. They were all killed in the last 4 days in Afghanistan. Who's talking about it? Who's focusing on it? And to think that the sacrifice that these people made was to allow us the privilege and the honor of self-governing ourselves, we better start reflecting what we do here to reflect the type of sacrifice, service, and commitment to this country that these 4 made. That's what needs to be done. So as you start to move forward, and you have to recognize there's challenges, and everyone in this room, I said, for goodness sakes, nobody's more conservative than military people. And people talk to me. I said, I'm a Minnesota Lutheran and a school teacher. We're so tight, we don't even, when I go to things, I'm looking to see if you have extra pens here to take back and use. That's what we do. So don't tell us that we don't understand about budgets, and don't tell us that we're not concerned about it. But here's the situation. We can't decide on an imaginary number and decide without taking everything into consideration that that's the number that'll keep this nation safe. We can't get that wrong. We must make sure the security is taken care of. And this idea that we couldn't do our job, so it went to sequestration and it'll just magically happen, is an absolute capitulation of our responsibility. It makes our nation no stronger. Ask us where we can find savings. And I can tell you this Tim came in front of us, Tim Tetz came in front of us as a spokesperson at the hearing for the American Legion and talked about the budgets. Thanks to you, we have a new GI Bill. Thanks to you, we have advanced funding. Thanks to you, the health care budget for veterans has doubled over the last 6 years. But you know what? This organization recognizes that's not good enough. What are the results? Adding another mid-level bureaucrat to the VA doesn't add to the care of our veterans on that floor, making sure they have nurses and everything else. So let's have a discussion of where we can save money. Let's have a discussion of where we put this nation on a long-term path to prosperity and reducing those deficits. We owe it to our children. This organization is concerned about many things. One of them, as a teacher I saw this, is teaching our children what it means to be an American, what it means to have that responsibility, what Americanism means to us, and what responsibility means. You do that every day. What we need to make sure is the budgets and the decisions we're making here reflect what the American people want. I have to tell you, when I talk to my constituents in southern Minnesota, I don't care if they're Republican, Independent, Democrat, it doesn't matter to them. When I tell them, when I was in Afghanistan, you know what our troops were worried about? They were worried about their families' health care and they were worried about their pensions. I said, do you think that's really what you want them to be worrying about? When their friends and colleagues are being shot on a daily basis, and yet at the end of the day, they have to worry about that. We can make tough decisions, but don't you dare put those on the front lines on the first on the chopping block. There are other decisions that can be made. This organization and the people you represent and the American citizens that are out there, you come with a moral authority second to none. You come with an organization that conducts its business in the best traditions of American democracy. And we are not going to say we can't do better. When Tim testified, he pointed out things as, where are we wasting money in the VA? Where are we not providing services where we could? Where could we trim things and still not affect the care and the security of this nation? We're willing to have those discussions. We're willing to lead on them. We want that discussion to happen, but be honest with the American public. Don't tell them that we can fight conflicts and defend democracy around the world. And don't tell them as we create more veterans that the budget can go down. And don't tell them that there's no need to do prosthetic research when members among you are wearing prosthetics. Don't tell the American public things that aren't true. The American public is willing to pay for what needs to be done. They're willing to stand with the veterans and with those families that have sacrificed so much. We do them no service, and we don't honor their service by pretending that everything's okay, by shifting numbers, by sequestering. So God forbid that if I have to go back in November and say, yes, I voted for more government spending on VA health care, make it and make the decision whether to throw me out of office in a good democracy or keep me, but don't go back and pretend that you're fiscally responsible or you're doing your job if you're not willing to have the discussion that the American public wants us to. And I have to tell you, this organization represents the conscience of 300 million Americans out there. You have to come here, and your commander has to do exactly what he's been doing, and our president has to do exactly what she's been doing, and call upon us, those that have the honor, the distinction of being able to represent their neighbors, to get this right on the most important issue of our day, national security of this country and the care of those willing to sacrifice. So I tell you today, standing arm in arm with you, I saw it for many years, 24 years as an enlisted soldier out there. And I saw it as someone paying my dues and watching what people were doing. And I wondered, how much of a difference does it make what they're doing with the people who sit here? And I have to tell you this, it makes all the difference in the world. They are lined up at my office over there on Capitol Hill today, the attorneys for all kinds of different things, good causes. I don't say that pejoratively, but they're paying people over there hundreds of thousands of dollars to come and make the case where we should spend the taxpayer dollars. You're coming here not being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're coming here with a passion of what's right. So you must continue to be here. The work that you do as the leadership in this organization is the difference between defending this nation properly, giving us a long-term future for our children, and honoring our commitments to the veterans. And for that, I can tell you, there is a grateful nation, and on behalf of the 650,000 Southern Minnesotans, thank you to each of you for, one, caring so deeply about this nation, and for two, willing to put your money where your mouth is. Come here, make a difference, and hold us accountable. So on behalf of all of my constituents, thank you. May God bless the American Legion, and may God bless this great country. Thank you.